Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. Today, as I cast on a pair of Ready, Set, Go socks, I'd like to teach you how to do the alternating long tail cast on. It has the stretch and the durability of the long tail cast on, but it creates a softer looking edge when your fabric starts with ribbing. This cast on works for fabrics that are knit flat in rows or fabrics that are knit in the round. Just remember when you're working in rows, if your first row of ribbing is going to be on the right side, when you cast on, you're looking at the wrong side, or vice versa. Since I'm knitting socks in the round, I'll be looking at the right side when I cast on, and will continue looking at the right side as I start knitting my ribbing. Let's get started. Just like the standard long tail cast on, we are going to start with a slip knot and leave a long yarn tail about 4 times the length we're casting on. The slip knot is placed onto the right hand needle. Tighten that up by pulling on the working yarn. And this slip knot counts as the first cast on stitch. Now we need to tension the yarn with the left hand in the slingshot position. And I do this by weaving the working yarn over, under the fingers on my left hand. And then these outer 3 fingers come forward and wrap around the yarn tail. And I'm just going to push the yarn tail kind of out of the way there so we can see things a little bit better. These 3 fingers were pretty much going to stay in place here throughout the cast on unless you need to retension your yarn. Next, the thumb goes down through the V and then rotates back into the slingshot position. Now, normally it's okay to leave the working yarn here at the base of the index finger for the long tail cast on, but for the alternating version, we actually need to have it up a little bit closer to the tip of the finger. So now you'll notice both the index finger and your thumb are inside this V, and both the working yarn and the yarn tail go up over your fingers. I'll be working knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for my pattern, so the slip knot counts as my first knit, and I'll be casting on the second knit just as if I was doing the standard long tail cast on. So I bring my knitting needle forward and up through the thumb loop, back and over the working yarn. I'm just going to turn things sideways here so you can see the working yarn is being wrapped counterclockwise around the tip of your knitting needle. Bring the needle forward through the thumb loop, drop your thumb out of the loop, the thumb goes back down through the V, and then rotates back to tighten things up. And I have a cast on stitch. Now I need to cast on my 2 purls. So the motion of casting on the stitches is going to be pretty much reversed. So this time my knitting needle goes back and then up through the index finger loop, underneath the yarn tail. But again, notice that if I rotate things here so you can see, the yarn tail is being wrapped counterclockwise around the knitting needle. Then pull the yarn tail back through the index loop, drop your index finger out of the loop, down through the V, and then rotate the index finger back to tighten things up. And let me show you that one more time. So for a purl stitch, I go back, up through the index loop, underneath the yarn tail. The stitch is wrapped counterclockwise around the tip of the needle. Pull the yarn back through the index loop, drop your index finger out of the loop, place it down through the V, and then rotate back to tighten things up. So let me show you the process one more time for knit twos and purl twos. So the knit twos are just like the standard long tail cast on. So the needle comes forward, up through the thumb loop, over the working yarn, pull the working yarn forward through the thumb loop, drop the thumb out of the loop, the thumb goes between the working yarn and yarn tail and rotates back to tighten up. The needle comes forward, up through the thumb loop, back over the working yarn, pull the working yarn forward through the loop, drop your thumb out, the thumb goes down through the V and then rotates back to tighten things up. And then for the purls, the motion is reversed. So the needle goes back, up through the index loop, under the yarn tail, pull the yarn tail back through the index loop, drop your index finger out of the loop, down through the V, and rotate back to tighten up. And one more time, the needle goes back and up through the index loop, underneath the yarn tail, rotate back through the index loop, drop your index finger out of the loop, down through the V, and rotate back to tighten things up. And you would continue casting on until you have the right number of stitches. Of course, this cast on can be modified if you're doing a different type of ribbing besides knit 2, purl 2. For example, you could do knit 1, purl 1, or knit 3, purl 1. Just remember to cast on the knits with the standard long tail cast on, and then reverse the motion for the purls. Often when you cast on in the round, you end up with an odd gap in between the first and the last cast on stitch that can be closed by casting on an extra stitch and then somehow binding it off or working it together with the first cast on stitch. However, if we look at things closely here, you can see that's not going to be something you need to necessarily worry about when you're doing the alternating long tail cast on, because the gap along the edge is very minimal, and it will pretty much disappear when you weave in your yarn tail later. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do the alternating long tail cast on. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you'd like to try this technique in a pattern, head over to the shop section of thechillydog.com and look for my Ready, Set, Go socks. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!